live.
हाँ बोलो किरण. हाँ पण I think Amit પાસે slide છે. I'm not sharing.
Team, we are live.
Are we audible? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keyur Shah. I head the Financial Services Tax Practice here at EY. Thank you for joining this session on GICs in GIFT City. I'm told we've got people from across the world dialing in. So good morning to people who are dialing in from the Western Hemisphere. Good afternoon to people within Asia, and good evening from Far East. Thank you for making the time. Hopefully you will find this session interesting. Our purpose here is to talk about some of the great incentives and capabilities which we are seeing being developed in the GIFT City. And over the next 1 hour, we propose to cover some of the key aspects around that. The Gujarat International Finance Tech City, as it is, or GIFT City as we popularly know it, as we know, was the brainchild of our Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. Since then, GIFT City has become the go-to destination for anyone wanting to set up any form of presence in India. In the financial services space, whether it is private equity, whether it is banking, whether it is capital markets, or even now in the context of global in-house centers. The GIC regulations were announced by GIFT City on 16th of October in 2020, and we've seen significant amount of traction around this aspect also. Talking about GCCs in India, as we know, there are more than 170 centers in India which are purely catering to group companies in the context of outsourcing activities, right from basic bookkeeping to high-end robotics and front office related support services. And they employ more than 400,000 people. So it's a huge, huge base. And therefore, in that context, to set up a GCC in Gujarat and what are the benefits in GIFT City is something which we would want to cover. From a GIC regulation perspective, and that is what I'll speak about in the next couple of minutes, we are told that any entity which is a financial services entity, which is regulated by a financial services regulator in its home country, and the regulated entity could be the entity which is outsourcing work or any other group company of that entity. That entity can be set up in the GIFT City to provide services to its group companies. So all I need is a entity in India which is rendering services to financial services entities across the world, which one or more of which are regulated by their home country regulator. The only other condition is that the entity to whom I am rendering the service should not be based in an FATF, non-compliant or grey listed jurisdiction. So, jurisdictions like Cayman, or to a certain extent now Dubai, if you are rendering services to those countries, then it may be difficult to be covered within the GIC framework which is announced. Otherwise, you could render services pretty much to anybody across the world. The kind of financial services which are covered are also very wide. So you could be a bank, you could be a financial intermediary, you could be an actuarial service provider, a clearing house, a depository. Most financial services providers are covered within the definition, and what the regulator or IFSCA has done is try to make sure that the definition is wide enough to cover most financial services or almost all financial services which are possible to be rendered and where there is a possibility of outsourcing work to India. In terms of the tax incentives which are available to centers which are in GIFT and IFSC, we have a 10-year tax holiday. The 10-year tax holiday also is in a period of 15 years. So you can choose the 10 years in a period of 15 years in which you will want to claim the income tax holiday. In addition to that, we are told that if you want to set up a unit in GIFT, and say, for example, the unit is a branch of an existing unit in India. So say, for example, you have a unit in Bangalore or Hyderabad, and you want to set it up as a branch of a unit in GIFT, that is also possible. But if you want to transfer employees in the unit in GIFT, then what you can transfer is mostly supervisory staff, and that also should not be more than 20% of the employee strength. So that is one, kind of a ring fencing provision which the GIFT authorities have kept within the regulation so as to ensure that people don't end up setting an entity in GIFT purely from a tax treaty or a tax shopping perspective. So that is one part which is important. The other interesting part also is that if you look at the minimum alternate tax provisions which are applicable to companies which operate in India, even if you have a tax holiday, if appropriately planned, this 9% MAT can also be done away with. And therefore, to that extent, if you are operating in GIFT and opting for the 10-year tax holiday, you could be in a scenario where you would end up paying zero direct tax. In addition to that, we also have, given that the GIFT entity would be based in an SEZ zone, all the tax incentive from an indirect tax perspective, which are available to that entity. And therefore, to that extent, there will be no GST applicable on input services. There is no customs duty applicable because, again, you are in an SEZ zone. Plus, export of services will be zero rated. So all host of incentives are available. So effectively, if you're operating in the GIFT IFSC entity, you will predominantly pretty much pay zero taxes, which therefore makes it the only city or only area in India where you can get both direct and indirect tax exemption completely now. Because most of the other SEZ related exemptions available from a direct tax perspective have been wound down and therefore to that extent not available. What we have done now is that we've got a group of people here which will talk about some of the key aspects around GIFT City, and therefore we've put together a panel. We've got Dipesh Bhai, who's the Executive Director at IFSC, Ashutosh Ji, who's the General Manager at IFSC, Sandeep Shah, who's the Deputy General Manager within GIFT City, Bhavesh Thakkar, who's my partner, who leads our incentive practice at EY, Sagar Shah, who's a partner within the Gujarat practice, and Amit, who's our indirect tax partner. So we'll run through quite a few questions and interesting questions which we put together basis discussions with various stakeholders in terms of what are the common questions we come across when we deal with people who want to set up a captive center in India. Amit, over to you to ask.
Thank you, Kevin, for that a lovely brief and cover on the GIT regulation. So while I think the SEZs have seen a sunset, on tax exemption, we suddenly see a sunrise coming in, GIC in Gujarat GIFT City. So the first question, and we've kind of collated a lot of questions and thoughts through various forums and meetings that we've had with several clients who are looking at the regulation very closely. I think one change that they see is that most of the GICs today are not regulated. So there will be a regulator if they come to an IFSCA. So my first question, Divesh Bhai, is to you. Is what will be the role of the regulator as far as the GIC is concerned at IFSCA?
Thank you, Amit, and thank you, EY, for putting up this very important webinar. As I agree with Amit that it's a sunrise for the GIC in the IFFC zone. I'm sure all of you are trying to evaluate the opportunities which is emerging globally, and we all are reading the type of the opportunities that India will be able to cater to is going to be something that the GICs will be the one capable to handle the flow of the opportunities coming from various parts of the world, including some places where currently there are a lot of disturbance globally happening. What as an IFFC unified regulator, having got the power of all the four regulators, RBI, SEBI, IRDA, and PFRDA, The first regulation for an IFFC authority which came out was on GIC. So on 1st October 2020, we got the all the powers of the domestic regulators combined into an IFFC authority. And the first framework or the regulation that we issued is on a GIC. And to answer to what Amit is saying, the reason for coming out with the GIC is one that we are recognizing that GIC is an important contributor to the ecosystem. If you have seen the financial centers flourishing globally, I think one of the important factor is the availability of talent and the manpower. And the GIC exactly provides that platform to a financial center. So we have recognized that as an important contributor to the entire ecosystem. While we understand the GICs are not regulated per se in the various financial centers. But let me tell you, of late, we are getting most of the inquiries from the GICs of what's telling us that it is better for us that if we get a regulated under a regulated umbrella, we will be able to add on a lot of work which we are otherwise not able to do in India. And for example, there are a lot of opportunities on the RegTech which is otherwise not been available to GICs here. There are a lot of opportunities which otherwise as an investment backup, which you are not able to do because you are not a regulated entity. That per se would be able to be addressed here, and which you are anyway flowing those work to some of your regulated entities outside where you can also contribute. So idea is not to be regulate GIC as a bank or as an insurance or a capital market entity. The idea is to bring them under an umbrella, give them a framework which is very conducive for them to operate from, and keep it a very light touch. If you see our GIC regulation, you will hardly find really a compliance burden when you are under an IFFC framework. In fact, it gives you an advantage of being an IFFC umbrella with all the incentives being offered from the zone.
Perfect, Dinesh bhai, I think.
And Amit, I wanted to add something here that, what we've seen practically, especially within the banking circle, is that, when they have set up their captives here, especially when you want to send work, which is more front office support, like, for example, investment banking support, or, broker dealer related support, or core banking related support. The regulator in the offshore jurisdiction typically insists that that work has to be outsourced to an entity which is regulated, and therefore they've had to split the work between the captive, which is the main entity which houses everything else, and then part of the work within the regulated entity, which could either be a broker dealer or could be a bank entity, and that causes a little bit of disruption in terms of how homogeneously this can work. And therefore, GIFT provides a unique solution because you are regulated. You don't need to therefore split your activities within what can be done within your regulated entity and non-regulated entity. So you enjoy all the benefits of the tax holiday, of the conducive environment which a GIC would enjoy. But at the same time, you have a regulator who is providing you a light touch regulation oversight and giving comfort to your overseas regulator. And therefore, that makes it a very win-win proposition, which was available not so far as India was concerned. And therefore, you had to actually split your activities within your regulated and non-regulated entity.
Thank you so much, Keyur. What you see on the screen is just a small land parcel of GIFT City. It is 800 plus acre land parcel in together. And then every passing union budget, you would hear something on GIFT City. Sandeep bhai, to you, the question is, what is the kind of infrastructure one will get to see when we enter GIFT City?
Sure. Thanks. I think we understand the importance of GIC business in India, and the way India is now attracting some of the GICs, and we have some numbers where India is basically India has a market share of 50% in this segment. Now, as a GIFT City, many of you know it's a greenfield smart city project, and because it was a greenfield smart city project, we could actually experiment in some of the infrastructure facilities that we have created. When we were interacting and discussing with some of the GICs in India, we found that apart from the regulation and the tax incentives, the other important aspects which are very important include infrastructure facilities, the cost of living, the standard of living, and availability of the ecosystem. I think that plays a very important role in terms of availability of talent and the social infrastructure. I think we have kept this in mind while developing and designing the entire master plan of the GIFT City. So it's not only a business district; it's basically an integrated city development project, where apart from commercial, it also includes the social facilities and the residential facilities. Our idea is to provide walk to work concept, and that is something very unique compared to the other financial centers globally or even some of the cities in India, where people generally in major cities or globally people travel from home to office for more than 30 minutes or 1 hour. I think this is something very unique where people can actually stay within GIFT City and can actually work within the GIFT City campus, which is 888 Sikar Lane. So as I was mentioning, it's an integrated city. It includes the it has a school like Jamnabai Nursery School from Mumbai. It has set up there from nursery to 12th standard. It is fully functional. More than 1,600 kids are already enrolled there. There is a state-of-the-art business club which has all the sports facilities, indoor and outdoor sports facilities. There is a five-star hotel by one of the well-known developer in India. Close to 1,000 apartments are also under construction right now from the developers like Shobha from Bangalore. And I think within the 7-8 kilometers of GIFT City, there are more than 10,000 residential apartments are available. And when I say 7 to 8 kilometers in Gujarat, it basically 1 kilometer is considered as a 1 minute. So within 10 minutes of time, you can reach to a residential destination. And these are the important point here is these are all the residentials are kind of affordable where even employee at a junior or a mid level would be able to afford the apartment in terms of buying that residential. So I think in terms of the social ecosystem, so while the entities already enjoy the regulatory and tax incentives which are available from the regulatory perspective, but at the same time from the employees perspective, because for the GIC employees and real asset. And for them, it provides a kind of a environment, social environment where the standard of living is much better, and it actually helps companies to retain the employee for a longer period of time.
I mean, Sandeepji, apart from this, I mean, because we're talking about GICs and they'll be all using a lot of technology. What about the technology infrastructure? And do you have high-speed bandwidth, data centers? Can you share some light on that?
Sure. So basically, as I mentioned, the GIFT City is developed from the perspective of creating global financial and IT services hub. I'm happy to share that the kind of companies which are today operating in the city, like there are 2 international exchanges operating, and these exchanges operate 22 hours a day. And one of the exchange in GIFT is amongst the fastest exchange in the world. The companies like TCS, the Bank of America, which is operating, they operate also on a 3 shifts or a 2 shift basis. So I think in terms of the availability of IT infrastructure, we have proven that it is one of the best in the region. To add to it, the GIFT City also has a tier 4 category data center, which is developed by Singapore Telecom. A tier 4 is one of the highest category and which provides the the power reliability, highest power reliability in the city. GIFT City actually receives power from the 2 live sources. So I think we have never seen power cut, in the state. It is generally a power surplus state. But to add to it, GIFT City has a 2 live sources where, considering some of the operations which where we have international exchanges, the international banks are operating, some of the large IT companies which are operating, they enjoy the the uninterrupted power supply and at the same time the data connectivity which generally requires for such activities.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to add to a couple of points here, the entire city runs on optic fiber, which is again, for an IT and the GIC, this is very important infrastructure being made available at the city level. We are experiencing that also, and the most importantly, the city runs on a district cooling. So if you run on a district cooling, I think this is 30% cheaper than your normal air conditioning system. And for GIC, probably air conditioning may be one of the major cost component. If they really see from that perspective, then this city also runs on a cooling system, which is 30% cheaper than a traditional air conditioning system, which really adds a lot of value to the through an infrastructure to the GIC.
Yeah. So some of these photographs which you see on the screen, these are actual photographs of the infrastructure facilities built And the left side bottom is something very unique where, it's a underground tunnel created throughout the city, which carries all the utilities and the, pipelines and cable connection, which means there will not be any land digging for any maintenance activity in the city. It's a actual photograph where even a vehicle can go inside and do the maintenance activity. So I think this kind of infrastructure will ensure that the right kind of IT connectivity the data connectivity is available for such activities.
So, I mean, when we say that, we have such a brilliant infrastructure and, an amazing 10-year tax holiday, customs is exempt, GST is exempt. Ashutoshi, will it be okay if, a unit existing anywhere else, just shuts off shop there and, moves to IFSC and, maybe, get all the employees along into IFSC? Is that permissible?
Thanks, Amit, for asking. A pertinent question. We hear this quite a few times. I think GIFT City is a greenfield project with a real green infrastructure on the ground, which works with GICs. Everyone wants to move in. And for this greenfield project, Government of India has given significant incentives, not only at central level, but state level as well. Given that a lot of GICs will like to move into GICs, we are seeing the traction. And there is significant demand, certainly in the post-COVID environment on the GICs. I think the demand is incremental in GICs. And if GICs are present in India in different SEZ or STPIs, they can set up in GIFT FSC as a new setup, whether in the branch form or the legal entity form. That doesn't require them for moving the existing setup. And that is not the intention, because in SEZ, it has seen the sunset on the tax side, whereas the tax holiday is provided only for GIFT IFSC will center. The expectation is that it should contribute to the incremental employment for the country. Hence, other GICs which are present in India, they can set up shop in GIFT IFSC and bring the incremental jobs to the country.
Yeah. So, today, and Dibeshwar, this probably, I'll start with you as a question. And this is a question in everybody's mind. Times have changed. COVID has, forced us to look at, better technology. Organizations today have to offer, hybrid workplace policy, and that's become a non-negotiable, for many. GICs, are facing a lot of resistance, from employees. They really don't want to come back all the days. As a regulator, how do you see this, and where do you see this, really kind of landing?
I was just referring to a WhatsApp message which was saying how to work from office. It's a step-by-step guide to work from office. The challenging time were there, I think, but most importantly now we see most of the people are dying to come back to office, if I can put it that way, instead of working from home. I understand that there would be challenges for some which will always be there, and for which I think the work from home during the pandemic was a new normal, and everybody, including all the SEZs in India, had to undergo that, and which was well received by the both industry. Government also was flexible. SEZs, Minister of Commerce was flexible to allow that. But to the point, if you are, I think, trying to, there is always a layer when the question is asked. People want to understand from different layer. So if I really unfold this question, the question is, can I keep working from home? If that is a question, then I think the answer to that is, look, this is the zone which is physically set up, which is an ecosystem builder for India, and you really want the ecosystem to develop. And from that perspective, I do believe that working from a physical location would be a requirement, because that's how the industry, not only in here but outside, forget about pandemic and the different challenges that people faces. There's always a flexibility of women employees having their own sorts of areas to handle. That's all I think has been flexible. But what has been more encouraging in the last union budget, if you heard, the finance minister has also said that the SEZ Act will undergo certain revision and changes, and considering that the IFFC is also sitting in an SEZ, We are also working with the Ministry of Commerce to see as to what additional flexibilities for an IFFC SEZ can be brought in, because from that perspective, it is not like a manufacturing unit. People are not here to manufacture goods, and here is to more deliver services. From that perspective, we are working with the ministry. But to simple answer to the question is that physical operations would always be there, and I'm sure all the companies, including the foreign companies or Indian companies, they all been they all been looking forward for their employees to come back to their offices, and that's how the industry is coming back on their toes from the offices. This is what I believe will be a way forward for the industry too.
Right. I think we keep talking to so many clients who are looking at Gujarat. I think they generally tend to land in a confused state because it's a very large state, a very industrialized state. Get labor of all categories. But when we speak about a talent that you need for a GIC or a GCC, for whether a business process, there is always a lack of clarity in terms of whether talent is easily available, and some of the research materials that are generally available, I mean, show that it's not very easy in Gujarat. Ashutosh ji, I know you and Sandeep bhai have done some bit of work on this, but you have a very different point of view. Do you want to throw some light on what kind of talent is available, and whether GICs wanting to invest in GIFT City and IFSC will face a hard time getting right talent?
Right. I think I will request Sandeep to work on the facts and figures subsequently, but some of the pointers where I've been tracing in GICs is that the talent requirement by skill that they require, typically it comes either from the financial side or on the technical side. On the technical side, typically it is the engineering IT kind of talent they look for, or at times the AI ML on the leading side, because some institutions are working with robotics. And we have done some study there, and we see that probably industry down south or up north in India, that is where some of these talent are working right now. However, the talent is not local talent. The talent has gone from the states like central belt of India, including Madhya Pradesh, or the western belt, including Gujarat and Rajasthan. These belts, if you see the numbers in Gujarat and Rajasthan itself, between them, they have around 50,000 plus of surplus talent, which is they're exporting today to the current centers in India. So the demand is already there, and the supply is already there. This talent has moved back to the home, as you rightly mentioned, that with the work from home condition, this talent is ready to be exploited as a lateral talent, as well as on the fresh talent. Gujarat has number of universities in which you produce engineering talent of more than 12,000 per annum, IT talent of more than 6,000 per annum. These are the freshers talent available here. And I'll request Sandeep to also state some of the recent hiring done by some of the GIC back offices and GIFT IFSC to give background on that.
I think we, because when we were interacting with some of the GICs which have set up their office in GIFT City, we also did some study in terms of the availability of talent in the state of Gujarat, and we found some interesting data and the numbers basically. What we realized that Gujarat has always been the supplier of the talent, both in the IT space and in the financial services space. Uh, the number says that close to more than 30,000 every year Gujarat exports the kind of talent to the other states basically. Uh, what we also realized that GIC generally requires two kinds of talent. One is a fresher talent, and the other part is the lateral kind or the experienced talent. The good part, what government of Gujarat has done is they've created a knowledge corridor just next to the GIFT City, which houses good very well-known universities and the institutes like Gujarat National Law University, or IIT Gandhinagar is just 3 kilometers, Dhirubhai Ambani IT College, Pandit Dindayal Petroleum University. So I think every year Gujarat produces around 6 lakhs of graduates, and this ranges from IT to finance to commerce to the various streams. Additionally, Gujarat already houses close to 5,000 IT and ITeS companies, and some of the large corporates includes TCS has 10,000 people set up in Gandhinagar. They already have 2,000 people working within GIFT City. Similarly, there are, Oracle is operating with their fourth development center in GIFT City. Bank of Baroda, which has more than 2,400 people working within GIFT City, and they are operating their entire India's back office operations from GIFT. And when we interacted with some of these institutions which hired basically recently from the state, we realized that most of this talent have been hired from the state of Gujarat. And apart from Gujarat, what they mentioned that they are able to get the talent from the states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh as well. So I think uh, we don't see any challenge in terms of getting the right kind of talent for GIC kind of operations based on our experience from the entities operating in GIFT City.
Right. And when you do a benchmarking, Sandeep, where does it stand in terms of talent? Between a metro and a non-metro, for example, does it change? Is it comfortable for people to move to a non-metro? Is it better from a standard of living perspective?
I'll give you one example to answer this question. One of the company, I'll not name it here, but after the 1 year of their operation in GIFT City, they realized that only one employee left during the year. And when their global head visited the center, he actually asked questions to some of the employees operating there. The answer that they got from the employee that at the end of month, basically the amount they save basically in terms of the salary they can keep in hand is much higher than some of the other centers from there where they operate. So I think from the employees' perspective, the as I mentioned, the standard of living is much higher where they are able to afford the apartments at a very early stage of their life. Additionally, because the travel distance between home to office is much lower, they are able to spend quality time with the family. The school is closer to the sometimes our employees actually, during the office hours, they will go for half an hour for a parents meeting and they can come back. That's how they operate today in GIFT City. So I think, and that is helping companies to actually retain talent, and that attrition ratio is much lower than compared to some of the large cities. So I think probably that will actually help companies to reduce their operating cost as well. If they are able to employ retain the talent for a longer period of time.
Also, I want to add that there is now proof of concept, right? As Sandeep mentioned, there is one MNC there, at least which has employed more than 1,000 people, 2,000 people, I'm told.
Yeah.
There may be smaller ones, but this is mass, right? Plus, in addition to that, TCS, Bank of Baroda, as you mentioned. So the talent availability has been proven to that extent because these guys are operating. They've been able to get the kind of talent which they want, and with the way things are going, and what we've seen actually with other centers also, is that normally talent attracts talent. So if you have that ecosystem which is built, then talent will automatically come because those employment options are getting created. And once you have proof of concept, which we have now, then I think hopefully this question should automatically answer itself.
Good. I think a state which is exporting 30,000 plus people every year, and with the pandemic, people really want to stay closer to their home location, any which ways. And with a knowledge corridor being created, Dipesh bhai, there are of course so many universities in Gujarat already, right? Both from central government and state government. There are foreign universities which are going to come into the IFSC framework. How do you think from a talent perspective, because this is a huge challenge for some of our clients, at least mentally, they're not able to get through whether talent is easy to find.
I would put it this way, those who want to come and start operating, they are able to find a way out. Just those who don't want to come, they will just hang on the talent, they will just figure out, ye nahi hai, talent nahi hai, wo nahi hai. Jisko start karna hai, I've seen they are able to manage and they are able to get better talent at a lower cost and they are able to operationalize. Plus, not only Gujarat, if you see talent, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, partial of Maharashtra, all is available when you are open your center in GIFT City because this all talent pool is happening from all the nearby states also. It's not only that the Gujarat, but people are able to come from other parts of the other states also, and that has been the experience of some of this GIC and others, that they have got talents from all the nearby states. But to add to answer to what you just now said on the foreign university, I think this was one more addition for from the in the union budget, in the last union budget, where the honorable finance minister said that a foreign university will be set up in an IFFC free from domestic regulation. I think it's a big announcement, free from domestic regulation, meaning that only in regulations from an IFFCA would be required for them to come in, which is also from a perspective that the financial sector will need a lot of high level skilled manpower also. Complex derivative transactions, international exchanges operating, you are talking of listing, trading, all those activities will require talent from a global talent to the financial center. So we are sure Gujarat is already housed to a lot of university. You see on the screen, IIT Gandhinagar is just 2-3 kilometers from the gift city. You have Dhirubhai Ambani IT College, you have Nirma University, IIM. So from talent perspective, the number of colleges and all are available. To add to that, we are adding an infrastructure also of a foreign university coming in, which is just to reinforce to all the participants that we are, the both central and state government are putting all out efforts to make this as a global financial hub.
I think this is sounding so good. Dipesh, while talent is so much relevant, talent also needs to be in high spirit. So just on a lighter note, Gujarat is a dry state. So this is again open to all the panelists to answer. I mean, is there something that differentially is being considered?
Sandeep, you would like to take this?
So basically, Gujarat, there is a perception that it's a dry state, but while Gujarat is also open to the people from the outside, and that's how you see the government has a policy where most of the 5-star hotels, they have a liquor shop, and if you are from outside Gujarat, you can actually get a permit, and you can buy from the liquor shop. So that infrastructure is already available in the state today, for the people, somebody traveling from outside. But in terms of the overall GIFT City perspective, as I mentioned, there are 5-star hotels within GIFT City, and those hotels will also have a liquor shop, which will meet the requirements of some of the young generation looking for such. When they are looking to shift to the Gujarat. So I think people shifting from outside, we don't see any challenge in terms of such facilities available in the state.
So I mean, to Keyur, all the dealings that you can do in the regulated entity in IFSC is through dollar, basically foreign currency. I mean, do you think this is an advantage or otherwise?
Yeah, so I mean, good question. I think it's a significant advantage because when we've seen, especially for the captives locally, the question which arises when you do your favorite transfer pricing compliances, etc., is that you have these forex costs, whether it should be operating, non-operating, and stuff like that. Now, because you are operating in a zone where there is no exchange control from a billing perspective, and therefore your books of accounts are in US dollars, your billing is in US dollars, your hedging cost A will get saved, and B, this whole drama around whether forex should be operating, non-operating, will all go away, and therefore that is a significant advantage because of the fact that you don't have to do compliances around this, and when you operate at a cost plus, then you are operating at that pure cost plus without forex costs, etc. So that's a other interesting aspect which has to be borne in mind.
Yeah. So, Keyur, when you spoke about forex, also I think the question is, can the global in-house centers also provide services to their entities in India? I mean, they may have a front-end entity also in India. Because I think somewhere I read, the regulation says exclusively for offshore business. Dipesh Bhai, Ashutosh ji, any of you would want to answer that?
So I think while the idea here is that how do we add value to India, and obviously the GIC framework, and probably this may be a right forum also to articulate that. See, idea of gift GIC or the IFFC GIC is not to make people relocate from other parts of India to IFFC, that will not be a value add to India. The idea is that how many new centers, how many new jobs we all can create in this financial center and do new work, which is otherwise not happening in India, and add value from that perspective. That is the idea. Now, from that perspective, if some of the work which you want to serve to the Indian entities is not happening in India today, and you want to add on to that, obviously, as a regulator, we will like to see as to what are those challenges, why you are not able to provide, and we will be able to examine from that perspective. Pure play, which is currently already been served by your Indian entity, whether you can transfer that work to this, I would say why you want to do that. You are continuing to do in from a center which is already helping you, but if there are challenges and you feel that there is a case there, as a regulator on a case to case basis, we have been always open to understand the difficulties of the institutions and try and address them.
So this is right. Again, I think this is more in the context of saying that, and I think I know what your answer is going to be, but we are, say for example, a bank sets up a captive in GIFT City. Now, and a particular operation is, for example, moved into that captive. Now that operation may be common to New York branch, London branch, and Mumbai branch. I think the question then is that if I'm serving New York branch and London branch, then can I serve the Mumbai branch also, or can I not serve it because it is part of India? And I think that part, I think we can definitely look at and see, because then that just makes it a homogeneous service being rendered. It's not about services which are rendered in other captives, but if I'm rendering this service as part of the whole global operation, then can I do it out of India? Just because it's rupee denominated, I don't think the answer should be no. I think that may be a
Sure. I think we'll be open to examine that. That's how.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And just to add to this question, basically, while if particular entity, so GIFT City, I'll just add here, while it's International Financial Services Center and GIC regulations are, provided by the IFSC. For some of the domestic operation, GIFT City also has a domestic zone associated with it. So if somebody wants to locate operations within GIFT City, the domestic operations can be in the domestic side of the GIFT City, and similarly, the IFSC benefits can be obtained by setting up in the IFSC zone. So that is something one can also consider.
Yeah, I think one has to bear in mind that GIFT City, while IFSC is one zone, but there is a GIFT City which is an SEZ, and it is the only multi-services SEZ. So you can practically do any kind of services from GIFT City. So if you're an IT unit, you can pretty much come into GIFT City. You may not be regulated by the IFSCA, but you pretty much can operate in the SEZ and use and leverage the infrastructure that is available. But I think again, coming back to location, location is so important, and while doing a locational study, incentives plays a big role. Bhavish bhai, you are there. Gujarat government has now issued a fairly new policy, and I think from the look of it, looks just amazing. It looks that it is very, very different from what the policies are in other states. Bhavish bhai, if you can just throw light on what is there in the policy and how units in the state of Gujarat can benefit.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. So rightly, you have said that Gujarat has come up with this new policy, which is, I will say, one of its kind. And I'll tell you why, because of the policy coverage also and the quantum of incentives what we are looking at. Because if you look at largely the incentive space in India, this would be largely giving to manufacturing and these kind of enterprises. So India as a country for state incentive, we are maturing more on the IT, ITeS and the service sector. And I will say Gujarat has taken a huge lead on this and on the quantum of incentives also and on the coverage also. So I guess the objective of the scheme is obviously to make Gujarat as a one-stop destination for IT, ITeS and attract, I guess, more and more anchor players. The operative scheme is it started on 7th February 2022. So this is exactly 2 months this scheme was launched, and it is valid up to 31st March 2027. So that is how typically the incentive work. They are valid for a 5-year period. Now, entities who have applied before 31st March 27 will get a 1-year leverage to start the commercial activities also. So if you have applied before March 27, you'll be able to claim those incentives, but you will have a leverage to start your activities before 31st March 28. And just to add a basic thing over here is this IT ITeS policy is over and above the benefits what Keyur and Amit discussed on the gift city. So this is something you will be able to claim over and above what we already discussed till now. Now, two differentiating factors, if I say, of this incentives or this scheme rather. One is the quantum of incentive, and second, I would say, is the eligible services and activities. I guess it's a wide coverage what they have given here, and it is more of a all-inclusive kind of a definition which will qualify for these incentives. Targets, I guess we already discussed that to place Gujarat in the top five performing, because now if you talk about IT ITeS, generally it moves towards Karnataka or Maharashtra or the Noida belt in Uttar Pradesh or the Chennai belt. But Gujarat, with this policy, I'm sure will break that barrier and touch the fifth in the top five states, I would say, in India. The applicability of the incentives is for IT ITeS units, and there is also mention of IC city and townships and the IT parks. Largely, what we will be concentrating in the next 10 to 15 minutes would be on the IT and ITeS units. But there is a very good policy for IT parks and townships also. So even developers can look into this policy. Now, typically, there's a concept of mega project which comes with policies. And this is a term which is largely associated with manufacturing enterprises, which is on the basis of the people what you employ or the capital what you employ. So on the basis of that, you qualify to be a mega project. The good part of a mega project is there are some specific incentives being carved out for a mega project. And there is also a process of negotiation, or rather putting your incentive wish list to the state government when we discuss about mega projects. And we'll go slightly detail on that. And what we also intend to cover are the incentives. And let me tell you, friends, when we did our back of the hand calculation on this, we are realizing that on both the capex and the opex subsidies, which we will discuss in a bit, we will land up getting 30 or almost 40% of our project cost back over a period of 6 to 7 years, if I count from the start of the operations. So I will say that is one of its kind subsidy. This kind of a quantum of subsidy has not come anywhere in India in this sector. There are benefits which are on the basis of electricity duty or power tariff, but when you're talking of a big capital subsidy, the capex support, that is something I will say it's one of a kind. And even as we are working internationally, what happens in a Europe or what happens in a US, this kind of a payback or a paycheck of 35 to 40% on IT ITeS sector is, I will say, something to look forward to. And Gujarat has really taken a lead on this. So moving ahead, and Anvesh, if you can move to the next one. So this is, I guess, the first highlight. I'll not spend much time on this. The intention here is to tell that mostly all the activities which is related to IT or ITeS is covered into this. And that is something which is really a good point of this policy. So moving ahead to the operative period, as we told, the scheme starts from 7th February 22 and it ends on 31st March 27. Now, what is an eligible unit? What it means is any new unit with a minimum of 10 employees. So let's not, so mega is one of the definitions what you need to look at. But even smaller units which are planning to start IT ITeS kind of an activity would also be eligible for these kind of incentives. So let's not get confused that only people who are employing 1,000 people or 2,000 people are getting the subsidies. Even eligible units would be new units with a minimum of 10 employees. Or if you are having an expansion, after expansion, you should have minimum 15 employees. So that is what a eligible unit will mean. Who can apply? The scheme is available to new and existing who undertake that expansion activity, and they are providing services in relation to IT. The definition what we saw about the IT ITeS. Now, again, a very important concept what we discussed about that investment in the field with having a gross capital investment of about 250 crores or generating a minimum direct employment of 2,000 people would be eligible for as a mega project. Now, this, if you see, it's a or condition. It's not an and condition. Either you meet the 250 crore criteria or you meet the 2000 employee criteria. Either you meet any of those criteria, you will be a mega project. And mega project, what are those benefits and what are there for a normal unit? We will see further. So what is a new unit? So new unit and expansion units have also been defined here. That new unit is IT ITeS that has obtained registration under the Companies Act and rather the different jurisdictions which cover whether it is partnership or proprietorship. An existing unit outside Gujarat state carrying out new investment in the state. So take an example, if a unit is there in Maharashtra and now for the first time they are coming in Gujarat, that will be something which will be called as a new unit. Now, obviously, there will be some questions like what happens to a unit if it is already then in Surat and now it decides to start a fresh activity in Ahmedabad. So whether that will qualify as a new or an expansion. So we have taken some of those aspects also. And expansion is also been defined. Expansion talks about that you are an existing unit in Gujarat and now whether you have expanded by 50% on the payroll. So suppose you had 100 people today and you plan to expand, whether you are adding 50 people to the payroll, and then if you are adding that, that is something which you will qualify as an expansion. So it is increased by 50% of the existing headcount or by 1,000 employees, whichever is lower. So very large entities, if they have a huge headcount, obviously if they are employing 1,000 people more, they will qualify to be as an expansion. Only one thing probably which I will say which will need to be seen here, that expansion would be qualified only one time during the operative period in the policy. So you cannot have multiple expansions. So that is also something which needs to be looked into. But yes, as we read the policy today, it is applied, those expansion criteria would be applied only once. So if you expand twice in the policy, the benefits would be availed only once is what need to be seen. And obviously, to be eligible for incentives, we discussed that you need to start the commercial operations before 31st March 27 or 31st March 28, as the case may be. Now, as we discussed about one of its kind policy, where a percentage of a capital investment is something which comes back to you as an investment. So what goes in a capital investment and opex is also very, very important. So there are two definitions which are giving out here. So one is the gross fixed capital investment and second is the eligible fixed capital investment. So gross fixed capital investment, when we are talking about the mega projects and all that stuff. So to determine that 250 crore, you will look at the gross fixed capital investment. And when you are looking at the percentage of capex which is given back to you, that will look at the eligible fixed capital investment. So there is a slight difference on what is gross and what is eligible. So largely, if you look at, land will not be considered as a eligible project cost. So no subsidy would be giving on the land cost. And I guess that's a logical thing to do if you compare it with other state incentives also, or even the Gujarat industrial policy. So land is something which is not being considered. Now, important point over here is what is the start date and what is the end date when you look at this whole capex. So the start date would be 7th February 2022, the date on which the policy came in, and the end date would be within 2 years from start of your commencement of commercial operations. So suppose you start your activity on 31st March 2022. Let's take an example. So your start date will be 7th February 2022 and you have started your commercial operations on 31st March 22. Whatever you have incurred as a capital expenditure up to 31st March 24 would be eligible for that subsidy. Obviously, the stamp duty registration fee which you pay to the government for lease, sale, transfer, that will be added as a eligible fixed capital cost. And as many of the units progressively will be looking at renewable energy expenditure incurred also, that equipment and also would be capitalized and would be added to this eligible fixed capital investment. So the important part over to look at is land is not there. But yes, when you look at the other activities, your start date and your end date is very, very important. What is slightly which needs further clarification is when I'm talking of a building. So building, when I'm going for a construction, that cost is included. But building, when I'm going for a purchase, or rather in a large IT park, I'm going for a lease or a purchase of that premises, that has not been considered. So that is something which we will discuss also further. Now let's jump to what those incentives are and what are those actual money which is coming to your bank account, which is to be seen. So largely, if you see, the incentives has been divided into three parts: the capex subsidy. So Anvesh, you can move to the capex part, the opex cost, and the special incentives which are there. So what is the capex subsidy? What is the capex support we are looking at? So for a non-mega project where the investment is below 250 crores or the gross fixed capital investment, it talks of a one-time reimbursement up to 25% of the eligible capex with a maximum cap of 50 crore. So if you are setting up a unit with a 100 crore investment, 25% of that will come back to you, which would be 25 crore in this case. And OPEX we will slightly discuss in detail because that has a 20 crore cap per year. And for a mega project, which is project about 250 crores, then it will again have the same 25%, but it will have a maximum cap of 200 crores. So friends, if you see actually this money hitting your bank account and how this will be disbursed is, this will be disbursed in 20 equal quarterly installments or 60 monthly installments, if I want to say. So 20 equal quarterly installments is what this money will be actually coming to your bank account. So whether this will be in the form of a scrip or a credit note or something, so no, this is hard cash which will come to your bank account. There is also a early mover advantage which is given to some of those units, where even in the case of 100 crore, it will be considered as a mega project, and thus the first three units which have a strategic advantage. So take an example where some of the IT units are not there in Gujarat in some of the regions, and if a unit is set up there, that will be sort of an early bird or an early mover advantage which we need to look at. There is also a high power committee which has been set. So if I say that there are 2,000 people being employed and there are 250 crores as a mega project, but take a unit which is coming with a 500 crore investment and a 5,000 people, then obviously there is a high power committee being formed over here, which has the powers to decide on subsidy, which is over and above the policy also. So that is a leverage which is there with the high power committee. Obviously, it will be used on a case to case basis on projects on very significant importance. So capital subsidy is the first bucket if I want to see on the state IT ITeS policy. Let's move to the OPEX now. And this is again very, very interesting, friends. If you look at the whole OPEX, and if you really look at if I want to say the profit and loss of a IT ITeS units, other than salary, these expenditure which you see on the screen are something which are the most significant ones. If you talk of the lease rental expenditure, yes, it comes with limits of maximum of 50 rupees per square feet in Gujarat. Then the bandwidth expenditure, the cloud rental expenditure, the power tariff expenditure, and the patent expenditure. All this would be clubbed in a bucket, and you will get 15% of that with the annual eligibility of 20 crores in the case of a non-mega and 40 crores in the case of a mega. So how will you get this? Again, this will be on a quarterly basis. So you incur all the expenditure. This will be a reimbursement method which will be there. You apply for those subsidies, and this 15% is something which you will get, and this is for a period of 5 years. Friends, if you look at the heads of expenditure, I think so this is very, very significant incentive to look at, especially on the lease rental expenditure, where if you're talking of a lease rental and 15% of that is coming back to you, and that too for a period of 5 years, this really gives impetus to newer companies to set up in Gujarat and actually look at making Gujarat as a base, because the initial funding what they'll have to do will be partly, so Gujarat government becomes a partner in the obviously the whole process of developing that IT ITeS unit. So that is something which is very, very significant out here. So this is the second bucket of incentive what we are looking at. Capex was one, the eligible OPEX is the second one, And the third one is special incentives which have been given. Now here, the first one is very, very important, where you are giving a employment generation incentive. And again, I will say one of its kind. So any new local employees hired and retained for a minimum period of a year at 50% of the CTC, up to 50,000 for a male employee and 60,000 for a female employee. Now, obviously, there is some interpretational thing here, like new and unique job created in a state. So if I am moving from Maharashtra to Gujarat, so whether that will be a new or unique, or if I am in Vapi and working in IT ITeS, now I have set up, rather shifted to Ahmedabad, so whether that will be new or unique, so that will be there, and we will wait for those operational guidelines. But again, if you look at the structure of the incentive, I guess it's very, very lucrative to look at. There is also a electricity duty which is there. So whatever electricity duty we will be paying. So typically, if you look at the Gujarat bill, 12 to 15% is something which is there, which comes as a electricity duty. This would be exempt for a period of 5 years. And if you look at the power cost, that is a more significant cost in IT ITeS. So that will be something which unit should look forward to. There is interest assistance. There is an interest subsidy of 7% on term loan or the actual interest paid with a maximum cap of 1 crore per annum. So me and Amit, we sat and we worked out some figures on the basis of what uh, industries or other IT ITeS unit will actually employ as a capital, and what is that return what they have looked at or they can be looking at. So somewhere we have reached that 35 to 40%, or even in some cases 45%, depending on the interest assistance, is something that units can look forward for incentives to come back. And obviously, if you compare with other subsidies, let me tell you, friends, just not because I'm a part of this seminar, but no state at this point of time comes closer to the Gujarat IT ITeS policy. Yes, obviously, there will be operational guidelines and those clarifications which would be there, but on a intent and I guess on a content, none of the state at this point of time matches this policy which is there. So I thought I'll cover this very quickly, and we'll have more time for questions, because I'm sure audience will be more interested on what are those questions, and we have August gathering here. So over to you, Amit, to take this forward.
No,
Thanks.
Bhavishbhai, we are already getting a lot of questions. I mean, it's amazing to see some of the questions. I think the first one that I would want to take is again connected to the policy. And but I think, from a quantum perspective that you mentioned, Bhavishbhai, 30, 40 or 50% what you get under the policy, and then you add an SEZ component, so you get a custom duty, you get GST, and then when you add income tax holiday, you add all the operational cost difference between, say, a metro and what is available in GIFT City. I think we're talking about much larger proposition of cost savings, or the delta between where you are today and where you can be. So it's much larger than that particular range. We have Sagar also on the call, and Sagar is leading our Gujarat practice. I think he's been very, very close to that market. Uh, is it okay, Sagar, if we were just to move an existing unit somewhere in Gujarat, say Surat, to a GIFT City, or a unit in Mumbai to GIFT City, will that qualify under the IT policy?
Thanks, Amit. And I think it's an important question, and Bhavesh also spoke about it to say that what are we talking about when we say that what is an existing unit? And I think one of the challenge that we're going to have is that when you look at a new unit to an expansion unit, what is going to happen is, say, and the example that Bhavesh was talking about, to say existing unit, say in a Surat or an Ahmedabad, but if it is going to set up there and give, then it is going to be considered as an expansion unit, and that is what is coming out from the policy, which means that in such cases you would have some challenges where you'll have to now go for the various criteria for employment, the increase in employment, etc., which are required from an expansion perspective. And I think that would mean, and probably this we have an August gathering there, and maybe Sandeep ji and someone else can also pitch in, where we are saying that existing companies in Gujarat who are, say, in manufacturing, wanting to diversify, looking at creating shared service centers, or there are many companies outside Gujarat who are having operations there and they wanting to start something, then they should be allowed the benefit the way we are talking of new unit. That's something which is an important perspective, and I think This is what we'll have to really look at, so that we have more and more companies also looking at this.
I think the just amazing amount of questions we're getting on the IT policy, but there's one, where Ashutoshji, I need your help to know. The question says, can an SEZ employee move to IFSCA? SEZ basically from non-DTA move to IFSCA. Is that permitted?
I think while we have kept this a very light touch regulation, only a couple of points that we have mentioned there again from the initial thought that incremental benefit should come to country is that movement of employees is permitted, but only to the extent of the supervisory level, and to that extent 20% is the cap that we have put. This 20% is on the base of the entity, GIC entity established in GIFT IFSC. So if in GIFT IFSC you are going to have 100 supervisory staff, 20% of that you can get from existing setups from Indian and other setups.
Okay. And Keyur, this question probably you need to answer. How do you deal with GAR when we are already in an SEZ?
So that's a interesting one. When you are looking at getting income tax benefits, the question of GAR may come up, whether you are moving to a gift entity because you want to avoid some taxes. Now, obviously, this has been thought through. I think there is an inherent check and balance built in the regulation itself to say that you can't move existing employees unless it is supervisory staff, and that to the extent of only 20%. So there is one check and balance which has been put in the regulation, and that could be useful. The other thing is again intent. I mean, as long as you are able to demonstrate intent that this is more of an expansion of an existing unit, you needed a new unit in any case because of your BCP plan, or you from a geographical risk perspective, you manage to grow as much as you can in a particular location and therefore want to expand in another location. All of those things can work towards demonstrating that you've not done this purely for the purpose of avoidance of tax. Having said that, again, the additional point is that again, as long as you're not moving lock, stock, and barrel, which you won't be allowed because GIFT City and FSC won't allow you to do that. The purpose of an incentive provision under law is always to encourage that benefit is taken by a taxpayer, and that in itself should be also a good argument to make when you are looking at GAR. So we've had situations where earlier people have set up presences in gift exempt jurisdictions in, say, for example, in Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand and things like that. And there is jurisprudence around the fact that if you set up something afresh in that location, maybe it is same or similar to what you were doing in other location, but there is some commercial rationale as to why the expansion has happened, then to that extent you should be entitled to the tax holiday. So yeah, it's not a simple cut and dry answer, but basis facts, I think you can come out with a fairly good answer from a GAR perspective.
I'm kind of forced now to take a question on IT policy. There's just too many of them coming. Bhavishbhai, this is for you. If a capital investment has been made prior to 7th Feb 2022, can that be considered as an eligible capex? And if I may just add to this question, if an entity has not claimed any IT incentive under the earlier policy, will they become eligible to claim that under the current policy?
So first part of the question, Amit, is yes, this 7th February, which was also one of the aspects which needs to be looked at, because clearly any expenditure before 7th February 2022 would not be considered as a eligible project cost. So here also I will draw probably a reference to the industrial policy of the state, the earlier one, which was the SGST base. So though that policy also came on 24th July 2016, what it talked about that all capital expenditure after 1/1/2015 would be considered as a eligible project cost. So they had given that leverage that though the policy came in 16, but the start date to consider the investment would be 1/1/15. So if a similar kind of a thing comes in the operational guidelines, I guess it would be helpful to some of the companies. And Amit, I will say, whether you started in the older policy and you have started the commercial operations in the older policy, now if you are expanding, you will be able to claim a benefit under the current one, the newer one. but not as a new unit. You will have to go as a expansion unit, is what my view is. But if there is some relaxation on that 7th February 2022 thing which is there, that would be helpful, is what we feel.
And I was just reading through the content. There is a mention of new and unique job to be created. By the way, what does that really mean?
Sorry, Amit, I missed it. Was it for me or Sagar?
Bhavesh, for you, what is the meaning of
Yeah.
new and unique job created in the IT policy?
Yeah, so if the intention is obviously that this should be coming for the first time in the scheme, or rather in the state, the employment is coming for the first time. If you read that word, that new and unique. So take an example like I'm working in Infosys in Gujarat itself, and now I am shifted to a Tata Consultancy Services. Whether it's a new and unique job, so the answer is a clear-cut no. So if I look at the guidelines, I may not be eligible for that kind of a policy benefit which is there. The second example would be that I'm in Maharashtra in Infosys, and now I'm coming to Gujarat Infosys. Then I will say it is a new and unique job created in the state, so I should be eligible, is what my reading is. The third is going to be very, very interesting. Now, suppose I am in Adani's or Reliance in the manufacturing sector in Gujarat, and now I decide to come to a TCS in Gujarat, which is from a manufacturing to IT ITeS. My view here is that because we are promoting IT ITeS, that should be a new and unique job created in Gujarat. Though I'm coming from manufacturing and I was already employed in Gujarat, but for a IT ITeS sector and a policy perspective, I will say it's a new and unique job created. That's my view. Sandeep bhai, if you have any thoughts on this.
I'll just add, sorry, I'm Dipesh here. I'll just add one point that when you said all this combination, the obviously the one where you are hiring new jobs from Gujarat, meaning that the new, those who have just passed out, or you're creating, employing the talent for the first time, that also is covered in the policy as a new and unique, right?
Correct, sir.
So just to add on the same, so this incentive is mainly from the perspective where, one of the incentive which is mentioned in the policy about is about the training. So government of Gujarat will also reimburse directly to the employees on the training that they will do, and that amount is also up to 50,000 rupees. And also from the perspective that the each employment that you generate, new employment that you generate, the company will get the up to 50,000 rupees incentive. Now, it is important for also for the government of Gujarat to ensure that the same employee which is shifting job from one entity to another, the government of Gujarat is not paying this amount for the same employee. So unique is from the perspective that the 50,000 incentive would be available for a unique employee. So there will be a unique ID which will be generated for particular employee. And a new job in from the perspective that it should not be a shifting from one city of Gujarat to the other city. The idea is to ensure that the new employment is generated, either a fresher is employed, which is first time employed, or somebody is hired from the other state to the state of Gujarat. So I think that is the intent of this policy. Yeah.
I think the next one, Dipesh, I think I'll just put it over to you. This is a very longish question, but it says, uh, due to a lot of incentives being offered on an overall basis to units in IFSC, do you foresee IFSC units acting as a competition to its own units in DTA? For example, IFSC bank units acting as a competition to DTA bank unit.
No, I think from an IFFC perspective, it's an offshore zone for India, so it does not compete with the domestic India operations. Whatever people are doing in the domestic zone is under the Indian rupees and for local domestic business, where the IFFC unit is not allowed to do domestic India rupee business in the IFFC zone. It is all dealt in a foreign currency, and thereby the unique differentiator is already inbuilt when the basic eligibility of an unit coming into an IFFC zone is concerned. And so there would not be a challenge on what you just now said. There would be no competition for domestic banks versus an IBU as far as the jobs and businesses are concerned.
Rather, I think two units when they are working, the ecosystem will grow such that the talent availability will increase for both sides. So it's complementary.
And I mean, one question is, Sandeep, I'll just hand it over to you. What is the process of getting a unit into Gift City and into IFSC? So broadly, what will be the process?
So from the IFSC perspective, it's a very simple process, and as you know, it's a unified regulatory body. The approval process is also quite quick. Uh, if you are setting up as a branch, you don't need to create any entity, and you can simply apply to the SEZ authority and the IFSC authority. And the application process is also well defined in terms of the application form. So you can directly apply and get the approval. If you plan to create a separate company, then you incorporate a separate company under the same ROC process. And once the entity is established, you apply to the SEZ and IFSC authority for the license. From the domestic side perspective of the gift city, because it doesn't have any special regulation or you don't need any approval, you simply identify the office space and start operating in the domestic zone of gift city.
So, Ashutosh, I'll hand over the next one to you. Can a company providing IT and IT-enabled services support its foreign financial group companies, banks to be set up as an IFSC unit as per the provisions of GIC?
As per the provisions of GIC, a company and the back office or the GIC can provide support services to its foreign offices and parent as well as subsidiaries. That is already enabled. I think what is not enabled so far is the third party under the GIC. There is a separate provision for the third party providers.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, the ancillary service is something which we could evaluate.
Right.
Bhavesh, I'll take one more question on the IT policy. What is the eligibility for IT companies already registered under the ITeS policy to become eligible under the new IT-enabled IT policy? Is it mandatory requirement to increase headcount by 50% of existing headcount or 1,000, whichever is lower?
Yeah. So Amit, yes, to qualify for an expansion, it would be mandatory to have that headcount increase by 50% or 1,000, whichever is lower is what we discussed. So there also the discussion would be that if I'm already having a unit in Surat and now I want to set up something in Ahmedabad, so then the base figure what was there in Surat would be considered. So suppose I had 500 people there, then I'll have to have 50% more over that on the payroll perspective. So that is something which we'll have to look to and meet those criterias of expansion which are there. Now, if you look at one more aspect over here, which also needs further clarity. So in the case of a capital investment, they have given 2 years from the date of commencement of operations to complete that capital expansion or capital project cost, which will be eligible for the subsidies. But in the case of expansion, they have not defined is by what time you need to complete this 50% employee criteria. So if I take a base date of suppose 31st March 22, I had 500 people. So I need to employ now 750, 250 extra. So then in that case, what is that end date we are looking at? So that is something which I'm sure will come in the operational guidelines. But yes, to meet the quality, meet the conditions of an expansion, that will have to be looked at and you'll have to expand at least 50%.
I mean, there's a question, I think we've kind of covered that, but maybe for emphasis, I think Sandeep had covered that. So I'll probably ask Divesh bhai to answer this. Do we need to have open a new company or, a branch unit will do?
In the GIC, we are allowed the branch also, and I think if you create an SPV or a separate entity, there is always a preferred. This will always go in the long-term basis, a segregation of your, ring fencing from the domestic and all. So from a regulatory perspective, we are allowed both. If you personally ask us as a, what if given a choice, we have both. What should we do? SPV will always, anytime, would be a better model.
Ashutosh, I'll ask the next one to you. What kind of accounts and records does the GIC need to maintain? Is it different from the rest of the business in India? I mean, do they need to create a separate books of accounts?
I think we have not prescribed the account keeping for the GICs. I think they are open to maintain the way they are maintaining in India. What we have mentioned in the regulation is that they have a reporting requirement, which is also on a very lighter side, and they have to report in that format to IFSCA. So only reporting format is required. How they maintain is for that side.
I think we're at the very fag end of the time as well. So maybe I'll just take a round of last voice on, and I see there's just tremendous participation from all of you, both in terms of being on the webinar and the questions that you're asking. Keyur, to you, a lot of clients are pretty much at the juncture of deciding where is the next destination. I mean, from all the discussion that you heard today, I mean, what is it that you would want to really add to this?
So I think that we've covered a lot of ground in terms of what should or should not be there, what are the conditions around when you could set up a presence in GIFT. I think that 4 or 5 things which a client would look at when he is wanting to set up a GCC in a particular location. One will be the infrastructure and the whole ecosystem around technology, etc. And I think that we've answered that question. I think we have excellent infrastructure, state-of-art stuff there. The other is on talent, and we've, I think, spent around 20 minutes discussing talent. Hopefully, all the concerns around talent have got addressed. The third would be things around connectivity, which also Dipesh mentioned about the optical fiber and things like that. And the last is the whole social infrastructure. And I think Sandeep mentioned one very interesting point around the fact that we want to inculcate this culture about walk from home. To be in a scenario where you can reach your home by walking in an environment where you are in any metro city in Mumbai, in India, and if your captive is in any of the cities, whether it's Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, and most other places, you would end up anyway spending from 30 minutes to an hour getting home from where your office is. This is a welcome situation to be in. So I think we've managed to tick almost all the boxes which are required. And hopefully to that extent, we should see far more traction.
Yeah. Sandeep, what do you have to add to this?
Yeah, I would like to add from the intent perspective of the government of Gujarat. So this, I'm sure many of you know that there was an earlier policy which was between 2016 to 21. And the capital subsidy, which was only 1 crore, has now been extended up to 50 crore. So in terms of the intent, is very clear that the state government is welcoming and he wants to attract the IT ITeS entities in the state of Gujarat. And second, as a GIFT city, we will ensure that the large corporates or large IT ITeS companies will get a single window in terms of obtaining these incentives as well. So we will provide kind of a dedicated desk to the companies where they will not have to move to the various desks to obtain these incentives. We will ensure that they get all the support to get the incentives from the government of Gujarat.
Yeah. And Ashutosh, I think you mentioned that it's already a light touch regulation. I don't think we've seen regulators being so open and available as you are. I mean, any last comments from you?
I think we have been interacting with the GIC industry of late, and talent has always been the issue, and where we discuss a lot. One issue that we did not discuss today is that probably it's not only the acquisition of talent, but also the retention of talent. And these issues have been highlighted to us from the GICs in all the key metros. And it's putting the pricing pressure on one side, other efficiency pressure on the other side. From what Sandeep earlier mentioned, I think industry in GIFT IFSC stage where this can be very key differentiator, purely because of the way the industry is coming up, the opportunities that are coming up, not for only the employees, but their spouses, the better partners, but also because of the overall ecosystem of the way ecosystem provides value on the work-life balance, which is the need of our post-COVID environment. So probably from talent side, people can consider that aspect as well.
And you always save the best for the last, and that's Dipesh bhai, over to you.
Thank you. I think, Amit, you've done everything. If I really see this webinar, from a in GIFT City infrastructure perspective, from a regulator perspective, tax regulatory framework being provided as a consultant, giving all the right numbers and giving the end-to-end solution to the industry. What else industry would ask for? I think it's an end-to-end solution being provided right at next door. And it is more becoming, the more I hear and more I see the presentation what you made is more and more becoming no-brainer. If you want an expansion of a GIC, this is clearly a choice for everyone to look at. I think it's only going to be now a matter of the institutions coming too fast and the infrastructure equally supporting that flow. And that's how we see it as a challenge, that there would be a more GICs wants to come in, and the infrastructure has to accordingly deliver in terms of ensuring that we are able to house so many new GICs and the number of jobs coming in the GIFT City. And I'm sure everybody, including GIFT City, Government of Gujarat, IFFC Authority, we all are geared up to ensure that there is no hindrance for this new industry to, as rightly said, sunrise into a new zone at the IFFC in GIFT City.
I think it's just the hour. It's just been an amazing 90 minutes. Thank you to all the panel members. Thank you to all who have taken time to participate. If there are any questions, keep adding that to the Q&A. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.